Hello, I'm Hazem Seeker. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. Italy wants to spend its way out of an economic slump, but it's breaking European rules by doing it. Also this week, tales from the crypto, why prices of digital currencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum and Ripple are collapsing. Plus, a dramatic fall from grace for a rock star CEO shifts a key alliance in the auto industry into reverse. Well, economic drama is playing out between Italy and the European Union. Italy has broken EU budget rules, and now the message from the European Commission is clear. The Eurozone's third biggest economy won't be getting away with it. Lawrence Lee has more from Brussels.
Rome may be the eternal city, but it's looking like someone needs to give it some attention. The social as well as physical fabric of Italy has been unravelling for years, with high unemployment and a persistently stagnant economy. Rather than pointing to the endemic corruption Italy has always suffered, the populist coalition government has squarely blamed austerity imposed by the European Union on its problems. But their vow to break hard-line spending rules from Brussels has led inevitably to an all-out confrontation with the European Commission, which has said it will impose sanctions and fines on Italy if it doesn't change its budget.
Let me stress that the situation in Italy is of common concern. Euro area countries are in the same team and should be playing by the same rules.
The response to all that from opponents of austerity would be, look what happened to Greece, which eventually agreed to European demands and suffered years of economic hardship, from which it is still barely recovering. The most important politician in Italy, the hard-right Interior Minister Matteo Salvini, said he was ready for a fight.
The letter from Brussels has arrived. I was expecting one from Santa Claus as well. We will respond politely, as we always did, but I will not back down.
The obvious political risk for the European Commission in trying to beat Italy into submission is that it's a political tool for people like Salvini, who will say it only proves how undemocratic European institutions are. Asserting sovereign rights will be a key theme for populists, not just in Italy, but across the continent, before European elections next May. If the European Commission doesn't get its way by then, the European Parliament could look very different. Italy looks determined to change the direction of Europe's economic strategy. The consequences could be destabilising.
Well, joining me now from London is Simon French, Chief Economist with Panmure Gordon. Thanks very much for being with us. So what are the scenarios here? If Italy doesn't budge on its budget, how's the European Commission going to respond?
Well, we're already seeing indications from the European Commission that they're not prepared to tolerate what are some fairly ambitious growth targets from the Italian government and a budget deficit that at this point in the cycle is not consistent with getting their debt burden, which is about 130% of GDP, under control. And this all stems back to the Stability and Growth Pact, which underpins the Eurozone. It is the sort of the fiscal discipline. And to your question, what I think the European Commission are going to do is look to get the Italian government to come in with more realistic expectations of what can be done over the near term in terms of fiscal stimulus, but also balancing the long-term sustainability of their finances.
And what about the fear that this could escalate into a wider debt crisis that could hurt the rest of the bloc? How real is that fear?
I don't think it's real in terms of the near-term risk. The contagion risk around the Eurozone is fairly limited, particularly with the European Central Bank still in bond buying program. I think the issue is much more idiosyncratic to Italy rather than presenting a structural risk of the type that we saw in 2011-12.
So are we seeing kind of a slow-burning crisis here then in terms of the markets up to this point haven't reacted too much to this, but is that something that could change further down the line?
I think that is the question. A slow-burning crisis of what I would describe as democratic legitimacy of the Eurozone project in Italy. And being a member of the Euro remains very popular amongst the Italian electorate. About 2/3 of them still support ongoing membership. But what they are uncomfortable with is the obligations that come with the, let's call it the privilege of being in the Eurozone. The obligations are to be relatively austere in terms of their fiscal outlook, and something that successive Italian governments have been fairly poor at doing. They've run an average deficit of about 3% of GDP over the last 20 years. So to be asked to pare that back at this time towards 2%, at the same point as they've elected a coalition government who want to be much more expansionary, comes with its democratic challenges rather than its financial challenges.
Just picking up on that idea of being expansionary, the Italian government are obviously convinced that this is the right thing to do for their economy, to spend their way out of it. What's your view on that?
Well, the problem is that having gone down the road of the last 20 years of Eurozone membership with the economic policy prescription we've had, Italian growth has been less than 1% year on year over a 20-year period. Now, that simply isn't sustainable. And of course, there is madness in trying the same policy prescription over and over again and expecting a different result. I think what you need to see to break this impasse is the Italian government saying, look, we want to be more expansionary on the fiscal side, but we're also going to do a lot more on the structural reform side to raise the trend rate of growth in Italy, because ultimately that is what all sides of this of the discussion, both the Europeans and the Italians, want to see, a higher rate of trend growth, but there are some painful decisions that come with that. That might be the trade that they have to do to get through this level of deficit spending.
Would you say Europe is more worried about what's happening with Italy than Brexit right now?
I think Brexit is the near-term risk, so it depends on your time horizon. In terms of what is going to impact Eurozone growth, the outlook, confidence over the next couple of quarters, I think Brexit sits front and centre as the most important risk for the European Union and the Eurozone to manage. Having said that, beyond a withdrawal and a transition and a new economic arrangement, the longer-term question is whether countries like Italy, but there are others on the periphery, who are happy with Eurozone membership, but are not happy with the implications in terms of control over fiscal policy, how we come to a position of agreement on that. We've seen comments from Jean-Claude Juncker, the EU Commission President, and also from Mario Draghi on the fact that that requires more Europe. And yet this is a time when populists are claiming electoral victories on the mandate of less Europe. That is the circle that needs to be closed.
All right, good to speak with you. Simon French, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
Now, as of this month, US sanctions on Iran have slapped back into place, and they're aimed right at the heart of the Islamic Republic's economy, oil. But one business in particular believes it is virtually sanction-proof, the growers and traders of saffron. Zain Basravi reports from Torbat et Haydariya in northeastern Iran.
Saffron doesn't need much water to grow, so traders are encouraging farmers dealing with nearly a decade of drought to swap crops. The farm-to-table process can be labor-intensive, delicate work, but in the end, it's lucrative. 90% of Iran's saffron is exported, and a kilogram can sell for around $1,500. The spice is a key ingredient in cosmetics, perfume, food, and medicine. The international demand is high, and people who want it will usually find a way to get it. Sellers say that makes US sanctions a buyer's problem.
This year, fortunately, not even sanctions have had an impact. It's actually better because the price has gone up.
Packed into these little boxes is the culmination of hours of manual labor by dozens of people, and that's why this sought-after spice is so expensive. So, can saffron save Iran's economy? Technically, it is possible, but there is a problem of scale. Iran does not make enough. Saffron accounts for less than 1% of Iran's overall revenue from exports. Still, it's big business in small-town Iran, and profits are up. though for some, it can be back-breaking, thankless work. The harvest season lasts only a month, and pickers are out from dawn to dusk. They say the minimum wage is not enough.
We live in poverty. We come here early in the morning, and sometimes when I come home, my child complains, saying, "I don't see you. We're not even off on Fridays."
While the government has poured money into helping the saffron sector thrive, the benefits have yet to trickle all the way down.
Now, still to come on Counting the Cost.
I'm Catherine Soy in a warehouse in southern Tanzania. I'll be telling you about a cashew nut crisis that has forced the government to step in and deploy the military to take charge.
First, he was so famous in Japan, he even had his own comic book series. But Carlos Ghosn's arrest and firing this week from Nissan Motors has been splashing across the world's financial pages. He's charged with underreporting his income and misuse of company funds. Ghosn was also the driving force behind the Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi alliance. And there's now a leadership vacuum in the operation, which sold 10.6 million cars last year. Natasha Ghanim has more.
Carlos Ghosn was an auto industry leader, respected by many in Japan. Now he's in jail and fired as chairman of Nissan.
It is not desirable that the foundations of the company are shaken by the arrest of Ghosn, but we are going to work hard so that it works in favor of the alliance.
Prosecutors say a whistleblower alerted them that Ghosn conspired to underreport his salary by about $45 million and used Nissan's money to finance homes from Brazil to Beirut.
I'm very surprised that this happened to the leader of the company that makes the car I drive. I really hope this is some kind of mistake.
Ghosn has been credited with reviving Nissan and forging a formidable alliance with Mitsubishi and Renault.
There are a lot of people on the board of all these companies that know how to run a car company, but the problem is his job was to knit together all these different interests and try and forge ahead with this kind of integrated global car maker. And without him there, it's harder to see that happening.
News of his arrest reverberated in France, where the country owns a 15% stake in Renault.
The state as a shareholder will be extremely vigilant regarding the stability of the alliance and of the Renault Group.
At the peak of his career, Ghosn earned the nickname Mr. Fix-It and was the subject of a popular Japanese comic. With the arrest, a Nissan executive is calling him greedy and saying the allegations show a dark side of the Ghosn era that is now over.
Now, Palestinians have welcomed the move, but lawyers in Israel have launched a class action lawsuit against Airbnb. The company is removing its listings of properties in illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. Stephanie Decker reports.
It's a rare victory for human rights groups who've been lobbying to stop commercial rentals in the illegal Israeli settlements for years.
Airbnb has sent an important message to the rest of the business community that it really is impossible to do business in or with settlements without contributing to inherent serious violations of international humanitarian law and the human rights of Palestinians. However, it was acquiescing to a policy in which Palestinians, ID holders, are not allowed to enter settlements solely because of who they are. And it appears to be the only case in the world for which Airbnb hosts are mandated by law to discriminate based on national origin.
US-based accommodation booking website Airbnb issued the announcement the day before Human Rights Watch was due to issue a report on bed and breakfast in the settlements, specifically case studying the activities of Airbnb and Booking.com. In a statement online, Airbnb says, "When we applied our decision-making framework, we concluded that we should remove listings in Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank that are at the core of the dispute between Israelis and Palestinians."
Palestinians say these settlements are one of the main obstacles to any future peace talks. They are illegal under international law, and their physical presence all across the occupied West Bank make the prospect of a cohesive Palestinian state far more difficult.
One Israeli minister has called for Airbnb to be banned in Israel following the announcement. And in the illegal settlement of Efrat, the mayor had this to say.
The decision made by the administration of Airbnb to outlease properties in Judea and Samaria is extremely upsetting. It's giving in to extreme people who don't have any intention in promoting peace, but rather bringing people further away from one another. It's not going to promote peace, it's going to promote anti-Semitic decisions made by such an organization.
Palestinians have welcomed the announcement, an announcement that we're told no one expected.
Of course, we very much welcome this decision, and we believe that this decision is very, very important. And we hope that all companies, all travel companies, will do the same as soon as possible.
For now, Airbnb says it will remove the listings from its site soon. The announcement won't change much for Palestinians on the ground. But rights groups say it's an important win which highlights the issue of illegal settlement expansion and of who has access to land, which remains at the very heart of this conflict.
What a difference a year makes. This time, 12 months ago, Bitcoin mania was all around. But the crypto hype hasn't been matching reality lately. Bitcoin is down around 75% from its all-time high of nearly $20,000, depending on what exchange you're looking at. The other major digital coins are also feeling the pain. The sell-off is being blamed on regulatory pressure. Now, the US Justice Department is reportedly looking at whether last year's 1,500% Bitcoin rally was due to manipulation. It is part of a bigger government crackdown on fraud in the digital currency industry. And then there's disagreement and rivalry within the industry itself. All of this helped cool the hype. Digital assets have now lost almost $700 billion of market cap since crypto mania peaked in January. Well, joining us now from London is Dr. Garrick Heilman, economist at the London School of Economics and head of research at blockchain.com. Thanks very much for being with us. So where do you stand on cryptocurrencies then? Is this the future, or are we looking at a bubble that's burst?
So we've seen prices of crypto assets like Bitcoin go up and down in the 10 years that they've been in existence. Bitcoin just celebrated its 10-year anniversary last month. It's a new asset class. It's uncertain how we should value it, and the type of volatility we're seeing is not a surprise. However, I think there's a growing acceptance and acknowledgement by not just technologists, but also regulators that blockchain technology and cryptocurrency are very much part of the future architecture of our financial system.
When you talk about regulation there, if there's going to be more regulation of this system, what form would that take?
Right. So that's been one of the big questions overhanging crypto assets is the lack of regulatory clarity. We're getting more clarity as we go along. We had an important enforcement action from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission recently on 2 ICOs that I think created more clarity around what's considered a security, what type of registration process ICOs will need to go through, what kind of penalties will be enforced for failing to register. We also are hearing some word that the Department of Justice's investigation into Bitcoin price manipulation is progressing. All of these things are going to help bring greater regulatory clarity and remove this kind of cloud, I think, that's hanging over the space and preventing things like Bitcoin ETFs from being introduced into the market that make it easier for investors to actually trade and own crypto assets.
Was there market manipulation going on when it came to the whole rally?
So that's something that the authorities are investigating. There certainly has been some work done by academics and others looking at trades on certain exchanges that do look suspicious. I think there is a big question mark around that. There's questions around how much trading volume is real and how much of it is spoofed or is wash trading. I think there's a general consensus that there has been some monkey business basically at work at some exchanges at least. And that's all part of the maturing of the space and something that needs to get cleaned up for institutional investors and retail investors to feel more confident and comfortable owning crypto assets.
And what about all of the disagreements within the developers community? I mean, how much of a factor is that in all of this?
That's certainly a factor. I think the recent Bitcoin Cash contentious hard fork, which Bitcoin Cash was actually a fork of Bitcoin last summer, certainly created some uncertainty. and fear. There's been some threats, and none of this, I think, makes people comfortable with how stable certain large assets are. It certainly, I think, has played a role in the recent price correction, which has been quite dramatic. At the same time, we're seeing a lot of positive developments. Transaction volumes on the Bitcoin blockchain have been growing, up from around 200,000 per day to around 300,000 roughly over the last 6 months. Blockchain.com is seeing steady growth in the number of wallets. The recent airdrop of $125 million worth of XLM has been very well received, great uptake there. So there's fundamental improvements that we're seeing that don't necessarily align with the recent price action.
And as far as all of the hype that surrounded this, particularly a year ago, the marketing around this, is there a sense that inexperienced investors were being led in without really knowing, without really having full knowledge of what they were getting into?
I think there certainly has been some fraud and some scamming going on. There's no question about that. We've seen the SEC and other regulators take action against some of the more egregious ploys. And unfortunately, with any new technology, we saw this with the early internet. Bad actors are often some of the earliest adopters. And we need, I think anyone trading crypto assets does need to do their homework and to really look, under the hood of what exchange or what project they might be interested in. There's still a lot of need for greater regulatory clarity, better data, better research. All of these things are happening, but they take time.
Good to speak with you, Dr. Garrick Harleman in London. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And finally, government leaders in Tanzania may soon have 200,000 tons of cashew nuts on their hands. They plan to buy the entire crop to try and end a price dispute between farmers and traders. Catherine Sawyer reports from the south of the country.
Dinez Nambara is harvesting the last of her cashew nut crop. But it's been a bad year. A disease that dries the fruit has meant she's only managed to fill 7 sacks instead of the usual 40 on average. To make matters worse, middlemen offered to buy them at an unacceptably low price. That caused the government to intervene and buy Tanzania's entire crop at $1.50 a kilo. The government's also undertaken to process and sell it all.
They wanted to buy from us at a cost that will not get any returns. We spend so much on fertilizers. The way the government has intervened is good.
The cashew nuts will end up in warehouses like this one to be leased by the government. Officials here and military commanders are working out logistics to make sure the process is smooth. And there's enough room to store around 200,000 tons of nuts.
We want you, the public, to coordinate with the military. We will need strong young men to load the trucks. Please don't see the army as the enemy.
Tanzania is one of the world's largest cashew nut producers and a major foreign exchange earner. President John Magufuli has sacked some ministers and government workers for failing to deal with the nut price crisis. This move by the government to buy all the cashew nuts from farmers in the south is unprecedented. The president has ordered the Agriculture Development Bank to pay up and for the military to coordinate tracking the nuts to warehouses. Traders and middlemen are being left out. At this time of the year, processing plants such as this one should be busy preparing exports. Most have shut down and those still operating will soon follow. Jamal Kamtwanje helps run the factory. He says a fall in cashew nut prices because of a surplus in the world market has made it difficult for traders to buy from farmers at the government's set price.
We've closed some operations and laid off 200 people. Next week, when this process is done, we'll have to send another 200 home. And once we finish packaging, the other 100 will have to leave.
Some traders say they're ready to talk to the authorities and reach an agreement. But for now, the government is firmly in charge of what is Tanzania's most important cash crops.
All right, that is our show for this week. Remember, you can get in touch with us by tweeting me at Hazim Seeker and use the hashtag AJCTC when you do, or drop us an email. countingthecost@aljazeera.net is our address. And there's more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That'll take you straight to our page, which has individual reports, links, and entire episodes for you to catch up on. That is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Hazem Seeker from the whole team here. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.